I am Randy Moorman, Legislative and Community Campaigns Director of EcoCycle. EcoCycle is one of the oldest and largest nonprofit recyclers in the country whose mission is to innovate, implement, and advocate for recycling, composting, and other zero-waste solutions to foster a more sustainable, equitable, and climate-resilient future. It is a good time to take stock in where Colorado is at developing a circular economy in which much of the stuff we produce is collected, sorted, and reused by Colorado businesses, generating jobs, valuable materials for producers, and reducing pollution. It is really an exciting time to be in Colorado. This morning, we released our 6th annual report on the state of recycling and composting. While our recycling and composting remains stubbornly low at 16%, which is half the national average and below our state's own goals, we have passed some significant policies that are going to transform how we do recycling and composting in the state. We are really poised for a big breakthrough. This year, Governor Polis signed into law House Bill 22-1355 and House Bill 22-1159. The first creates a producer responsibility system that, when implemented, will provide everyone in the state with convenient recycling and a clear list of recyclable items, as well as providing businesses with higher quality, reliable recyclable materials for their products. This was the third bill of its kind in the country. Now, the second bill I mentioned develops a circular economy center, which will help businesses that reuse recycled materials make new products right here in Colorado. And we are so grateful today to have both Governor Polis and First Gentleman Marlon Reis with us. Thank you both for your leadership and joining us today.
Thank you, Randy, and good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the 2022 State of Recycling and Composting Report Briefing. I want to thank EcoCycle and CoPIRG for their work on this report. It's the 6th annual report, very important barometer. Each year we take stock of where we are, the progress we've made, and looking forward to the work ahead. Recycling and composting are really important efforts across our state, and we aren't where we want to be yet. We're making important progress. In 2019, I signed legislation creating the Front Range Waste Diversion Fund, which provides grants and technical assistance to communities to increase recycling, composting, and waste reduction. Our local communities have really been leaders in recycling and composting, and this is a common sense effort to empower local efforts on the ground. In 2021, I signed legislation that lets local communities decide for themselves whether they want to limit the use of plastic bags or take out styrofoam and other single-use items. Previously, there was state preemption that didn't allow that. We are giving power back to our local governments to decide for themselves, our citizens. And earlier this year, of course, we built on the success with 2 major bills to fundamentally advance recycling in Colorado. First of all, the Producer Responsibility Act, which is kind of a public-private partnership that supports recycling and infrastructure across the state, helps make our businesses more resilient with supply of raw materials and waste reduction. And also HB 22-1159, which created the Circular Economy Center at Department of Public Health and Environment that is working to improve waste diversion and recycling. And they go together, the Circular Economy Development Center and the Producer Responsibility Bill, because once we've captured more recyclables through producer responsibility, we can attract more businesses to the state to turn those products into new products for us to use, creating good paying jobs, strengthening existing businesses, and preventing the need for mining or addition of new resources to that. So it's good for environment, good for our economy. Recycling, reuse, and manufacturing industries already support 86,000 jobs, $8.7 billion in economic benefits. When I was proud to sign, literally as a bald eagle flew over our head at Evergreen Lake. Some of you were there. The nation-leading bill to begin the development of the producer responsibility system in Colorado, which we're very excited to work with our private sector partners to deliver. Altogether, these efforts are positioning Colorado to really be a leader in the national effort towards recycling and reuse. I want to thank EcoCycle for your work expanding recycling and composting support on these key actions we've taken. The partnership has really been critical and will continue to be as we move closer to our sustainability goals as a state. I'm excited to turn it over to a champion of sustainability, our first gentleman. First and foremost, we've she's trained our daughter well. Every night she asks 3-4 times, can I bring out the compost? Can I bring out the compost? And we say, no, you got to eat more. No, you got to eat more. Finally, as a reward for eating a good meal, she gets to bring out the compost. And she's always very, very excited to do that. And I'm excited to turn it over to First Gentleman Marlon Reis.
Thank you, Jared, and to everyone here. That's actually a true story, by the way. Our son and daughter have fully embraced zero waste as a philosophy and a way of living, and it really emphasizes why it's so important to develop these concerns and interests and skills at a young age. So it is wonderful once again to be here with all of you today to celebrate this report, to celebrate America Recycles Day, and also we're on day 2 of Colorado Recycles Week. So this is a wonderful occasion to celebrate much of what the governor mentioned in his remarks, some of the exciting progress that Colorado has been making over the last several years. I would be remiss not to also give big thanks to Randy Moorman and Suzanne Jones and all the incredible staff at EcoCycle, as well as Danny Katz and CoPIRG for their continued leadership on this critical issue. None of this would have been possible without the hard-won victories and hard efforts at the state capitol that you guys all put in. Recycling and composting are really among the easiest and yet most impactful ways that we can contribute to the health of our planet and also the resilience of our communities. As this year's report shows, Colorado has taken several giant leaps forward to make our state a recycling and composting leader. This is thanks to the visionary leadership of Senator-elect Lisa Cutter, who until November 8th had and is still serving in the state house, but will be serving in the state senate, who I want to congratulate for leading the charge in the state house, and as I said, will now bring her extraordinary talents to the Senate, as well as 2 of the finest possible champions for sustainability in the state assembly, Senators Kevin Priola and Julie Gonzalez. Currently, less than a third of Coloradans have guaranteed access to recycling, and that number is even lower for Coloradans who live in apartment buildings and in rural communities. With the implementation of the new producer responsibility system in 2026, Colorado will skyrocket to the top tier with 100% of Coloradans having access to free recycling. And that's truly incredible. Over the last 4 years in serving in the role of First Gentleman, I've been asked time and time again from all corners of our state to have access to recycling services. And oftentimes they just haven't been available. So for the first time, those communities are going to be able to participate in recycling and composting. So as we see from the State of Recycling and Composting in Colorado report, many of our cities and counties around the state are also leading the way. To name a few, the city of Boulder leads citywide composting and recycling at 44%. The city of Loveland leads in residential recycling and composting at 58%. And the city of Fort Collins leads in industrial composting and recycling at 66%. These are inspiring numbers in and of themselves, but we can all look forward to seeing them go up in communities all across our great state, thanks to our new producer responsibility and circular economy laws. Lack of access has been the main barrier to achieving our sustainability goals, but now we're finally in a position to break through and claim our place as a true leader in the United States. By increasing access, we can make composting and recycling more than an afterthought. It can become a part of daily life for every Coloradan, no matter where in the state they live. Our future success as a state depends on the actions we take today to care for tomorrow. We've always been a state of people who value the beauty of nature and the natural treasures that we have in such abundance. And these laws are proof positive of that commitment to protect what is most precious. I'm so proud of all the incredible work done by EcoCycle, Recycle Colorado, CoPIRG, Senators Lisa Cutter, Kevin Priola, Julie Gonzalez, and all of the many companies and manufacturers who work together to prioritize the health of our planet and communities. So I want to thank you all so very much for your leadership. It's truly an honor to be here with you today, celebrating these historic victories. Happy America Recycles Day. Happy Colorado Recycles Week. And it's now my great pleasure to turn it back over to my dear friend, Randy Moorman.
Thank you, First Gentleman, and thank you, Governor, and congratulations, Governor, on your re-election. We're very excited to have you lead our great state. I am now going to turn it over to my good friend, Danny Katz.
Wonderful. Glad we're all friends and excited to see everyone here. I'll go ahead and welcome the panelists if you want to turn your cameras on. And what we're going to do now is talk a little bit more about this transformational policy, which is really positioning Colorado to have a major breakthrough over the next few years. And it's the kind of policy that, you know, it's hard to say a transformational policy flew under the radar, but I do think it flew under the radar. And I think there's a lot we need to do to help educate people. What does this concept of producer responsibility mean? And so we have a number of people here who can kind of talk about the state of recycling in their communities and some of the challenges that they're facing. And I think by bouncing around the state and seeing this through the eyes of the folks who are on the ground working to make this a reality, you'll be able to see the importance and the transformational nature of this policy. So when I think about it and when I'm describing it to people, you know, what does producer responsibility mean? I think of a couple of things. I mean, the first thing is it all goes back to our ultimate goal here. I mean, we want to start with reduce, we want to then reuse, and then we want to recycle. And ultimately, when we're recycling, we want to make sure those materials, whether it's glass or aluminum or cardboard or any of the other things that we collect, we want to make sure those materials are turned back into something that can be reused. That's really the ultimate goal in my mind of our recycling system. And so when you think about recycling, there's a couple of really key steps. First off, we have to collect those materials. And so producer responsibility will help provide recycling, easy access to recycling across the state, as the first gentleman was describing earlier. So it's going to ensure that everybody has as convenient access to recycling as they do to trash pickup. And so, you know, if you have a curbside trash program right now, you'll have that curbside recycling bin that you can put those recyclable materials in there. So that's the first thing, is it just provides access. The second thing is it provides more consistency. Right now, it can feel like you need an advanced degree to know what goes in a recycling bin. And so, you know, this consistency will allow us to get rid of what we currently have now, which is really a patchwork. And it's really, you know, up to the communities to figure out, can we get this to market? Can we not get this to market? And so having a bit more consistency will make it a lot easier for somebody, whether they're in Denver or in Summit County or in La Junta or up in Craig, to know what goes in a recycling bin. So that consistency will be really helpful, not just from a consumer perspective, but it will also improve the quality of the materials we're collecting, because we won't have some of those things in our bins that can disrupt the process. The third big thing, though, is we need somebody to pick up those bins and get those materials to market. And so there's a whole infrastructure of transportation and processing facilities that are really, really important as part of this. And then lastly, we need to make sure we're raising our hand and sending a signal to the marketplace that Colorado is the place to come if you want materials. If you're a big company and you're producing bottles or boxes, that you know that we now have a steady, reliable, and large supply of materials that you can use instead of going somewhere else and producing or trying to get those materials from virgin sources, which are oftentimes more energy intensive and can create a lot of pollution. So this is a way to be able to signal to companies, this is the place that you should be to grab those materials and produce those bottles and boxes and cans so that we can truly have that circular economy. So in my mind, that's what's really transformational about this policy. Those are key things that are filled in. And ultimately, that whole program is paid for by those very producers, by those very companies, based on the packaging around their products, whether it's the cans or the bottles or the plastic wrap that comes around that. This is new for Colorado and very transformative, but something that dozens of countries around the world already have in place, and a number of states are moving in this direction too. So it's an exciting moment for us as we start moving down this path. And again, hard to imagine something as transformational as that flying under the radar, but I think we do need to do more to educate people. So we'll have some different folks put some perspectives on this. And then if we're happy to take questions, please feel free to use the Q&A chat, the Q&A function or the chat function. And we'll get to those questions once we get, kind of a lay of the land from different perspectives around the state here. So again, thank you for joining us as we're talking about recycling and this producer responsibility policy and how it's going to really be impacting Colorado. I want to start with the access concept. So one of the things that the CoPIRG and an EcoCycle report found is that there's just a lot of communities right now that don't have access, easy access to curbside recycling. There's lots of cities where it's not universal, where you're on your own to try to figure out, how much does it cost? How do I find these, a recycling cart or bin? And so I'd love to get Councilwoman Alison Coombs from Aurora to weigh in here. Aurora is a major municipality in the Front Range, but yet access is really a challenge for people who live in Aurora. And so Councilwoman Coombs, thank you for joining us. And if you just talk a little bit about some of the challenges you see in providing access to recycling in your community.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me, and happy America Recycles Day to everyone. Always excited to talk about trash recycling and compost. In the city of Aurora, we are one of the largest cities in the state, and yet we have a system that I tend to refer to as the Wild West. There are really very few regulations in place on who, on when you get your trash, how many trash days you have, and whether or not people have access, which is really the biggest issue, as Danny highlighted. Each person is responsible for contracting their own trash and recycling service in the city of Aurora. And so what that results in is that a lot of people don't choose to sign up because you have to pay extra on top of your trash to get the recycling. It also has resulted in a situation where people living on the same street, getting the exact same service from the same company, are paying different rates. And so people don't trust the system in terms of recycling and trash, so they're less likely to participate. And for multifamily, which has been mentioned, the majority of our multifamily residential developments do not have any access whatsoever. It's up to the management company to decide, are we going to provide recycling or not? And the majority of them decide, no, we're not going to pay extra for people to recycle, because that's just another cost on us, and there's no requirement that they provide it. So we have a large number of people in our community who simply have zero access whatsoever and no control over whether or not they get that access. So that access issue is huge. And then it also creates other downstream effects and impacts environmentally in the community. We have obviously a lower recycling rate, one of the lowest recycling rates in the entire state, which means we're not doing our part to make sure that those materials are getting back into that waste stream and into that production stream, which Danny already noted is bad because of the resource intensive nature of creating new products. But it also means that we have neighborhoods that have anywhere between 3 and 6 trash days a week, which means you have every single day almost that trash trucks are polluting the air in our neighborhoods. And also for every truck that is driving on our streets, that's the equivalent of 1,200 single occupancy vehicles driving on our streets. So when you have 6 times as many trucks or 5 times as many trucks as you actually need, that's a huge impact on our infrastructure, which also then has an environmental impact. And so we really want to see that change, right? I was a big proponent of the producer responsibility bill. I think it will give us the opportunity to create some streamlined systems in the city of Aurora. We are working to take advantage of some of the grants the governor talked about for technical assistance, but we ultimately need the resources and the support to make a new system happen, to make sure that there's equity in cost and access across our entire city, and that we are able to really create those efficiencies that will produce a greater environmental positive impact for our city. And so we're thankful to you all for working on this bill, thankful to the governor for signing it, and very excited about the possibilities and the future of a more sustainable and healthy Aurora with the producer responsibility bill.
Great, thank you very much. And I think that definitely painted a picture. I guess I just asked one other question. I mean, as a councilwoman, do you hear from your constituents that they want recycling? I mean, is this something that they're looking for or even expecting?
Yes, so I have a lot of multifamily HOA communities in my ward, and their HOAs are not providing recycling to them, and not even permitting them to hire someone to come curbside to get recycling. So that is an issue that I've heard from my constituents. And we also used to have a drop-off site that the city hosted, and that got closed down during the pandemic. So since that happened, I've heard from even more folks who were actually driving their own recycling to a city drop-off facility that now don't even have access to that. And so there really is that demand. People want to be able to recycle and they can't. I've even heard from people that they drive their own recycling to a friend or neighbor's house in another community so that they can recycle, which is dedication, and we greatly appreciate it, but people should not have to do that.
Absolutely. Especially when you think about, I mean, so much of the stuff that we produce is valuable to be reused. So it's just kind of silly that we're forcing people to either pay a lot of money or drive and carpool their recycling to a location when a lot of that stuff is valuable and something that businesses can take and reuse. So yeah, thank you for painting that picture. I'd like to go into the mountains now, up to Steamboat Springs. Thank you, Councilwoman Garey, for joining us here. And again, you know, a part of this is about access as well. There's also costs and challenges you're facing. So can you talk a little bit about some of the challenges and costs, and then why it is important in your community to be expanding recycling as well?
Oh, yes. Thank you, Danny. You know, I really appreciate the opportunity to provide the rural perspective in today's conversation. And certainly thank you to the folks on the call who, you know, have been worked tirelessly on this and move forward. You know, all the municipalities in Rock County, including Steamboat Springs, have adopted a climate action plan. And, you know, as part of that climate action plan, we do have a goal to increase our waste diversion by 46% in 2030 and by 85% in 2050. But as was noted earlier, you know, we do have challenges, and we recently had a study done here in Steamboat, and our recycling rate is just about 9%. So, you know, we absolutely have a lot of opportunity. And again, as I mentioned, just as, you know, as a mountain town, we've got a number of different challenges and unique challenges, right, that come with being a large tourist destination. We on any given any given weekend, we can have our population double almost, right? In terms of the number of visitors that come to our community. And so we've got a lot more waste those weekends than we do, absolutely during mud season. And another issue that we face here in Steamboat is that we have basically a privatized system, I think similar to, what you were just talking about. The county doesn't own the landfill, and nor does the city contract with a single hauler for any sort of trash or, recycling services. We have 3 different haulers, and they all accept different, materials. And then each of the municipalities in the county also have kind of varying levels of, what they offer. We do have curbside recycling in Steamboat for our residential customers, but there is not any curbside recycling for the unincorporated portions of, Routt County. Just this year, I'm proud to say that in Steamboat, we did adopt an ordinance that will require recycling be offered to multifamily residences as well as to, commercial. We don't have any mandatory kind of commercial recycling today. But as I mentioned, we've got a privately owned landfill. We also have a hauler who is constantly asking the city to basically relieve them from requiring them to recycle glass. So, and we have the nearest interstate is over 100 miles away as well. So we've got significant, transportation costs that come with kind of moving those various recyclable materials.
And can I just interrupt on that one? I mean, for that, glass is code oftentimes in the recycle world, as I understand it, like very valuable. So, yes. Glass can be reused almost infinite number of times into infinite number of bottles. And so when you say, don't want to pick up the glass, from what I understand, a lot of that has to do with the transportation costs you were mentioning. It's bulkier. And so in a more rural area, this is an example of somebody like me coming up from Denver going, well, of course you can recycle glass, putting it in the bin, but actually you all are incurring a much higher cost to try to get that material back to where it needs to go. And so is that kind of what you're talking about in terms of the hauler wanting, saying, I'm not sure we can take glass anymore?
Right. No, that's absolutely the case. I think it's twofold. One is just the potential contamination for the broken glass, right, that comes with this, as well as secondly, it's absolutely, the cost, right, in terms of getting that material to a market, to an end market. So right. That's absolutely kind of the issues that we're facing, even though I think there is information out there that, I think we're still within the mileage that it makes sense, but it is something that we continue to have that conversation.
Right. And so, again, having this sort of investment coming in from this new producer responsibility system, in particular in rural areas like your own, where your population doubles, how do you support a population that's much larger without some sort of investment? It sounds like producer responsibility will go a long way to helping invest more in your community, build out the infrastructure, make it more possible and consistent in Steamboat Springs just as much as anywhere else. Is there anything else you wanted to add about the benefits right now?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think you're exactly right. I mean, from that perspective, we're really excited about the Extended Producer Responsibility Act, and particularly the comment that you just made about uniformity and about having kind of consistent, uniform, statewide, recycling, so that when people come into our community, when they come in from the Front Range, they can recycle here just like they do in at home. So that is going to go a long way in terms of increasing the amount of recyclable materials that we have. Our local sustainability council gets questions all the time. People who come into our community and they're renting a condominium and they can't believe that there isn't recycling made available to them. So they're actually taking the time to call our council, sustainability council, and say, okay, what kind of materials can I recycle and where can I take them? So, I think from that perspective, the Extended Producer Responsibility Act will go a long way toward, just increasing the amount of materials that we have so that it will make it much more economical in
Absolutely.
terms of, creating an infrastructure and a system that works.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's great to hear it's economical, but also it's, sustainability is a big part of this. And you mentioned climate. So we'll talk about that a little bit later as well. So thank you very much for that perspective. Now I want to turn to, we talked at the beginning, I said it's about access, getting customers access to bins where they can put their recyclables, but somebody needs to pick that stuff up. Somebody needs to process that stuff. So I'd like to introduce Suzanne Jones with EcoCycle, the executive director, to just tell us a little bit more about, the importance of investing in that sort of what I'm going to call middle infrastructure, the folks that get the stuff, process the stuff, and then get it ready for businesses to then reuse. So Suzanne, would you mind just again describing what you all do and how important that the investments in that part of our infrastructure is?
Thanks, Danny. Be happy to. So EcoCycle is the contracted operator for the Boulder County Recycling Center. So that's all where all the single stream materials that go into your bin go if you live in Boulder County and a little bit outside of Boulder County. And so I should also note that EcoCycle also is a hauler. We pick up composting and recycling from businesses. And we also do public education to teach people what goes in the bin. So we have a lot of experience trying to make this work, and it is challenging. So how it happens is that haulers pick up recycling from residences and businesses, and they bring it to a MRF, or a materials recovery facility like the Boulder County Recycling Center. And it all gets dumped in a big pile on the tipping floor, and then huge front loaders put it onto conveyor belts. And then it goes through this whole Rube Goldberg type system where we've got equipment and human sorters who are separating the materials out into different types of commodities. So the first thing that happens is you separate the cardboard and the paper off, and it goes off into one side of the plant to be separated into cardboard bales and paper bales. And the containers go down the other conveyor belt, and they get separated, and plastic gets separated out, and steel and aluminum and glass falls through the cracks into a big bin of glass cutlet. So, and then all these materials get baled into and tied together with baling wire in these huge bales that get stored out in the yard, and then we sell them on the market. And so we advertise how many bales we have, and then companies around the world, but we try to limit it to North America, so we try to process domestically. We sell those, and they get taken in trucks and rail cars off to mills or whatever. Most of our stuff, except for glass, goes out of state because we don't have end markets here in Colorado. And so that makes it, if we did, it'd be cheaper to transport and we'd get more money. So that's one thing. I also would note that 85% of the people and 85% of the waste and the discards are here on the Front Range. So at least we are proximate to each other and to transportation. Rural communities, as was just noted, it costs a lot more to do things like glass, which is heavier. But ironically, we have a glass remanufacturer here on the Front Range who can't get enough glass, right? They have to import from out of state because we are not collecting it enough here in Colorado. So these are some of the challenges and also some of the things that would be fixed by these new policies.
And I think one of the things you and I have talked about before is consistency. So consistency is really helpful both for consumers knowing what to put in their bins, because if they're not doing a good job, then you all in that middle zone are, you feel the impact of that. But then also just consistency in that it sounds like in your community, a lot of that infrastructure you're describing has been set up or paid for mostly by taxpayers or cities or municipalities, which means there's a lot of places in Colorado that haven't done that. So we're lacking that consistency. We're lacking the broader marketplace. So would you talk a little bit about that?
Right. The Boulder County Recycling Center was built back in 2001 because citizens organized themselves to pass a county tax in order to pay for it. And so that's the kind of program that takes, local governments have to shell out money and the taxpayers as well. We just heard an example from Aurora where they had to shut down their drop-off center because they didn't have the money. So this is a big burden. And the farther you are from the markets, the more it costs. And I'll just note that recycling and composting has to compete with landfill fees. And Colorado has some of the lowest landfill fees in the country. On average, it costs like $22 a ton to go dump a load at the landfill. It costs a bit more to recycle and compost. And so in part because we don't have economies of scale. And as was noted, each community has access to different infrastructure that can take different materials. So it's very confusing to the consumer. Can I recycle this or not? And that also makes it harder because when those materials come to the MRF or to the, the recycling center, people got it wrong, right? And so a lot of that stuff has to be sorted out. And if it wasn't in the guidelines for that MRF, it ends up going to the landfill. So having a standardized list and having more volume and an educated public about what's accepted, all of those things will be very beneficial economically to the businesses that can then take this larger, cleaner stream of material to remanufacture new products from. And it will also do great things for our environment and for our carbon footprint.
Right. As a reminder, we'll be able to take questions. If anyone has any questions, you can put it in the Q&A or the chat, and we can take a look at the end there. I know we've talked to a lot of you individually already, so you might not have many yet, but if you do, go ahead and put those in there. I want to turn to Grand Junction because, Kim, you work in the recycling, you run the recycling program in Grand Junction, and a lot of what we've talked about, I mean, I think is things you've seen as well. So can you just talk a little bit about your program? Like what are you all able to provide out on the Western Slope, and any of the challenges that you face in trying to provide those services?
Yeah, so with our program, recently our company was acquired. So we were private. Now the city actually runs its own recycling. We're able to offer that. We have the ability to capture, the city residences, but on the Western Slope, there's such a, there's smaller communities that don't have access, just like the Eastern Plains, or we're so spread out that that's what's really difficult. So in the city of Grand Junction, we do have curbside residential collection for recycling. We also have trash hauling. So we do provide that. We also have a small processing facility. I wouldn't necessarily consider it a MRF because we are such a small scale, but the ability that we have to be transparent with our, customers saying, yes, we're really processing your material, I think goes a long ways. And once we're able to do that across the statewide, to have that consistency on that messaging, it'll improve what we're able to capture across the board.
And you've been telling me you've had the ability to keep the material you collect pretty high quality, which is important because, again, we want this stuff to be turned into something else. And so can you just talk a little bit about the success you all have had to just keep the material, relatively high quality in terms of what people are giving you?
So we are unique as we are a multi-stream collection program. We're not single stream. So there's essentially 5 streams. Our glass is always kept separate. And yes, we keep that local, keep it in state, send it, over to Miller Coors. Our paper products, our plastics, we keep that local because they are collected separate and processed separate. So we're able to work directly with end markets in Colorado for our plastics and most of our paper as well. So without that ability to keep it clean the way that we're able to do, we would have to go elsewhere. Hoping with the EPR growing and being able to be a hub and spoke model for the Western Slope. Although the city of Grand Junction, our location is perfect. Everybody hauls to Denver or Utah. So developing this hub as Grand Junction and then having the surrounding areas be able to come, I think that would expand and have great options for us.
Right. Well, thank you very much. So I want to now turn to Liz Chapman, the Executive Director of Recycle Colorado. And for folks who don't know, Recycle Colorado, you have a broad membership, a bunch of different, organizations and companies. And so I think if you could talk a little bit about the kind of last step, once we've processed all of this, once we've sorted it and we have these materials ready to go, how can a producer responsibility system be beneficial for those companies looking for those materials for their bottles and their boxes and their cans and all that?
Thank you so much, Danny. Thanks for allowing me to be part of this illustrious panel. And I would reiterate what Governor Polis said at the beginning, that the EPR legislation and the Circular Economy Development Center are two parts of one answer to this recycling issue. So you are absolutely correct that the EPR legislation is going to allow us to collect the material, and then the Circular Economy Development Center is going to ensure that there are businesses ready to use those materials and have them turned into consumer products. At the moment, we have crossed one of the biggest hurdles, which is getting the legislation passed. The next year and a half, a little less than 18 months, will be spent having the Producer Responsibility Organization, which is called a PRO. They are the producers and brand owners that send these hard to recycle packaging materials into the state. And up until now, there has been no system in the United States until the 4 states that passed EPR legislation this year passed it. There was no skin in the game for the packagers. They left it to consumers and government jurisdictions to dispose of materials after consumers purchase them. This is a system to get them involved. This is saying, instead of passing on all of those costs to the people who buy your goods, you now have a share in solving that problem. So we are going to be establishing fees. And when I say we, the Producer Responsibility Organization will establish fees for various types of packaging that is sent into the state. And then over the next year, the advisory council, which is a whole bunch of non-producers that are going to vet what the plan is, what the fees are, what the needs assessment comes up with that the PRO establishes. And in conjunction with the Colorado Department of Public Health and the Environment, we're going to be able to present to the legislature in the spring of 2024 a plan. And the idea behind this structure, which makes Colorado relatively unique, is you've got the producers coming up with a plan, assessing fees on themselves based on different materials. Then you have an advisory commission that are industry experts that are going to make sure that this is a sound plan, that it will meet the needs of Colorado, that the fees will result in enough money to pay for what is needed to achieve recycling for all Coloradans. And then finally, the state has oversight within the Colorado Department of Public Health and Education, and Public Health and the Environment, to recommend a plan and send it forward. And I would put out to all of the people watching that this is not new. We are not reinventing the wheel. We are refining the wheel. Over 44 countries in Europe have extended producer responsibility laws. 16 states in the United States introduced legislation similar to ours in 2022. So this is something that we hope to be a model for, and we hope we've improved upon what our colleagues have done previously, but this has proven successful in Canada and throughout the European Union, and we expect it to be successful in Colorado as well.
That's great. And that's a great point. Like, this is, while we are breaking ground, where many have already come. So we're able to build off of a lot of the lessons that have already been learned, but ensure that we do it in a way that meets the needs of Colorado. Liz, can you give us any sort of sense of, like, are companies already starting to come together and talk about forming this producer responsibility organization? Is there some sense of momentum around, is there some sense of momentum, even though I know we have 18 months to wait until there's an actual sort of proposal being put out there? Is there some sense that companies have already started talking together and starting to think about forming something?
100%. The several producers have already formed a working group to try and get the Producer Responsibility Organization off the ground. They have already issued a request for proposals. They're evaluating consultants. So they have not firmly established exactly who is going to be on that, but they are well down the path of establishing it. The law states that they have to have it in place by July of 2023. I fully expect it to be several months in advance of that. I think we will see it early in the year of 2023 that they will establish themselves and get their work going. They are my conversations with that group indicates that they recognize the needs assessment, which is a survey of what is it going to take in Colorado in terms of infrastructure, in terms of education, in terms of materials collected. What does Colorado need to achieve the goals set forth in this legislation? They know that that's going to take a significant chunk of time to properly assess and evaluate. So they want to get that started sooner than later.
Great. And all of this sounds like a lot of work. And so do you get the sense, I mean, again, we keep thinking if we do this well, then all these companies are going to have a whole lot more material, more high quality material to use for their own products. Is that the sense you're getting from people of one of the motivating factors from some of these companies is to set up a system so that they can start supplying themselves essentially from our recycling bins?
From the companies that are already engaged in this process, yes, I would say that there are several large corporations like Driscoll's Berries, Coca-Cola, Pepsi. There are several corporations that have made sustainability commitments. They have committed to their customers that they want a certain percentage of recycled content in their packaged products by various dates. Most of them set a deadline of 2025 or 2030. And currently, they cannot meet those dates because we're not collecting enough material, not only in Colorado, but nationwide. So they have a stake in this because they have made a commitment, and the only way to meet that commitment is to collect more material. And in Colorado, the way to collect more material is through providing equitable recycling access across the board. As several other panelists have already touched on, the current system is inequitable. It isn't equal access. It's costly. It's confusing. The Front Range, although that's where most of the material and the people are, they have way more access in general than the rural parts of the state. And the rural parts of the state want to be part of this solution. They want to get those materials diverted away from landfill and put to good use. So not only do the brands have a stake in this, but we're hopeful at Recycle Colorado that this is also going to build up more businesses in Colorado. We see a lot of economic potential when we couple this EPR legislation with the Circular Economy Development Center, that not only are we going to divert more material from landfills, but we're going to build a stronger and more resilient economy right here in Colorado. A couple of the panelists have already touched on glass is recycled here in Colorado, and a little bit of plastic is recycled here in Colorado. Let's up those numbers. Let's get aluminum in the mix. Let's get paper. Let's get all the plastic recycled right here in Colorado. It is good for the environment and it's good for business.
That's great. So I'm not seeing any questions in the chat or the Q&A right now. So I think what we'll do is just wrap up. And again, this policy has an opportunity to transform our recycling system in Colorado, as our report has shown for the last 6 years. You know, CoPIRG, EcoCycle have been diving into these numbers and found that there are definitely cities that are showing that having a good recycling rate is possible. But right now, it really is a patchwork. There's an inconsistency. There's a lack of a marketplace here that allows businesses to grow and thrive. There's a lack of an ability to get the environmental benefits that are so important for so many communities. And so there's just so much that goes into ensuring once you've had your soda, does that can or bottle get into a bin, get into a cart? Does that cart get picked up? Does that get taken to a facility where it's sorted out? Does it then get lifted up to a business that can then reuse it? That system right now is really lacking in Colorado, but we have taken actions in 2022, specifically around some of these state policies that will go a long way to helping us break through and become a leader in the country. So I want to thank everybody who was on our panel here, and especially Governor Polis and First Gentleman Reis for giving us some inspiration at the beginning here as we dove into this. And again, we're happy to answer additional questions as we go along. The report is in the chat right now, but we're happy to set up time to talk with others. And I hope everybody here just continues to talk about the importance of this program, because it's easy to pass something and then forget about it after, and given how long it's going to take to put this in place, it's important we keep this on top of mind for everybody. So first gentleman, Reis, I'll give you a last chance. If there's anything else you wanted to say, having kind of sat through and listened to this, any parting words for us before we wrap up?
Thank you so much, Danny, and thank you to everyone who's spoken. I'm the least expert person on the panel here, so I wanted to hang out and just learn from everybody. I'm a huge fan of recycling, obviously a huge proponent of it in the governor's office, and I guess what I would love to say is that I am just thrilled that these two pieces of legislation passed, that they became law. They are complementary. And exactly as you said, Danny, capturing materials, but then also attracting businesses and markets to Colorado that will then turn those products into new products. And we do have that, I know, for glass, which is exciting. I think I learned from EcoCycle that the time between finishing a soda or a bottle of water in glass and it becoming a new bottle is 30 days. And that's without ever leaving the state. And so when we're talking about sustainability, creating jobs, stimulating our own local economies, it's just so exciting. And just from my perch in the governor's office, I will definitely say from all of our wonderful rural communities around the state, that this is absolutely something I hear about constantly from members of the community. They want the same kinds of access that some of our front range cities have. And this is so important to caring for our planet and caring for our communities and creating a better world for ourselves, but even more importantly for future generations. So thank you guys for allowing me to be a part of today. I always learn so much from everybody. You guys are great.
Great. Well, thank you for joining us, and thank you everybody else for tuning in, and we're happy to answer questions offline and check out the report at EcoCycle's website in the chat there. Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.